here's the other thing to think about in what you just said. Mike, do you remember maybe, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago, right on this show, when I was talking about Geno Smith? And I had a conversation with Geno Smith after one of his big wins. And he steered the conversation because I said to him, what's the moral of your story? And he just said, hey, don't make a decision on a quarterback after 1 or 2 years. Quarterbacks need time, especially when they're going to situations that are hard. He said, what was Peyton Manning like after his first year when he threw all those interceptions? Were you really sure about Peyton Manning? What was Troy Aikman like after his first year? Were you really sure about Troy Aikman after the Cowboys are terrible in year 1 and not so great in year 2? And by the way, what about Steve Young when he broke in with Tampa? What'd you think of Steve Young in that first year, or maybe first and second year? What did you really think? And this is the point I'm going to make. Bill Walsh once said, if I see a player do something 1 or 2 times, I can coach him to do it all the time. Bill Walsh would have watched that Baker Mayfield drive last night, and he would have said, I want Baker Mayfield on my team, period. Because he made 3 throws on that drive that were just out of this world, beautiful throws, and excellent catches, by the way. But they were right where they should be in heavy, heavy coverage, tight coverage. So all I'm saying is I know it's become fashionable to laugh at Baker Mayfield. He's done. He's finished. Forget Baker Mayfield. Let me just tell you something. Don't you think now that it's easier to look at Baker Mayfield with his awful year last year in Cleveland and say, you know what? Maybe it was because he was injured. Maybe we shouldn't have expected, first of all, maybe he shouldn't have been playing with all those injuries, number one. And number two, maybe we should factor that in when we consider what to think of Baker Mayfield. So, Mike, I just think there are so many lessons in that game last night that stand out to me. But one of them is, I don't know why we're so quick to bury quarterbacks. But you know what? We are.
There's always a new supply of them coming in. The bad teams are in position to go get them. The fans want excitement. The fans want something different. And the fans say this guy stinks. But you're right about Baker Mayfield. Look, he had given the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes everything they could handle in the playoffs to cap the 2020 season after beating the Steelers in the wild card round. And then they gave the Chiefs everything they could handle week 1. They had to go back to Kansas City, and it was a good game. He injures his shoulder against the Texans week 2, and he's never the same the rest of the year. And the Panthers thing happened so late. I said earlier this week he never should have accepted a trade to the Panthers at that point. He had $19.9 million he was going to make this year, fully guaranteed when you factor in the 17th game check. Not 18.8, 19.9. He gave up $4.6 million to facilitate that trade in July, and it just didn't happen. It wasn't enough time. He signed on with a coaching staff that was on its way out the door. It was a bad mistake. He bet on himself, and he lost. I said this earlier in the week too, Peter. We love it when guys bet on themselves because we can cheer for them when it wins, and it's not our money if they lose. He lost $4.6 million, and the best move he made all year was requesting his release. Because now, just based on last night, whatever he does the final 4 weeks, like you said, there's going to be a Bill Walsh out there that watches the tape from last night and says, I can make Baker Mayfield into that every week. He's going to be our starting quarterback next year, and it will not surprise me if it's the Las Vegas Raiders.
How about, Mike, you know what continues to amaze me? Yeah, I read this, so I can't absolutely say it's factual, but I think this is true. Is it true that the Los Angeles Rams were the only team to claim Baker Mayfield?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So think about that after watching that game last night. Because listen, you really don't know in the claiming process in front of you, because I think the Rams were third in the claiming priority, if I'm not mistaken. They were either third or fourth. But
Third.
but you don't know who in front of you puts a claim in. So, to me, the one thing that boggles my mind is why in the world didn't the 49ers put a claim in on Baker Mayfield? That just seems just crazy to me. Unless they think, oh, we just don't like this guy, we've heard too much about him, or we've got personal knowledge about him, blah, 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 whatever it is. But, man, that's pretty weird that, you're willing to have Josh Johnson as your backup, being one snap away from having to go to the playoffs and depend on Josh Johnson. I'm not criticizing Josh Johnson. He's a useful piece to have on your team. I get it. I understand it. But wow, when Baker Mayfield is there to not even claim him, whether you think you're going to have a chance at getting him or not, I don't know. That's pretty weird to me.
That's a great point, Peter, and I think there's a psychological element to it. And I've been asked about this several times this week. It's not like each team gets dibs and you move on to the next one. You have to put in your waiver claim blind. You don't know who else has done it. Unless word gets around. And on, what day was it? Tuesday afternoon, word got around that the Rams were claiming him. He said he already booked his flight to L.A. He took the chance that he was going to the Rams. So once it's known that the Rams are doing it, that becomes a factor in whether or not you do it. Because if you're the 49ers and you have reliable information, as I believe they did, that the Rams were taking him, if you put in that claim, all you do is potentially undermine the perceived faith you have in Brock Purdy. Because that's what the narrative would have been. Well, they really don't believe in Mr. Irrelevant because they're going after the guy who was the first pick in the draft instead of relying on the guy who was the last pick in the draft 4 years later. So I think that may have been a reason why. The word definitely got around that the Rams were taking him. And so why bother at that point? Why introduce some extra element to your team if you're not going to get the guy?
Look, Mike, you absolutely could be right. There are a lot of connections, even though there's kind of a bitter rivalry there. Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan one day will be sitting on the beach in Hawaii and having 16 Coronas and, talking about life, because when all is said and done, they're good friends. Okay. But I do think I hear what you're saying, but quite honestly, Brock Purdy has not done enough. And, I don't care if the mentality of my quarterback, if the mentality,
I understand what you're saying,
but if you absolutely knew, then I understand it. But, and Mike, you're right. Maybe they did know, but if they didn't know, that's a weird thing to not claim them, because I believe that, I was at the 49ers game. I spent 20 minutes with Kyle Shanahan after the game. I spent 8 or 10 minutes with Brock Purdy after the game. So I have a little bit of an understanding about why the 49ers love this guy. And I wrote a lot about it on Monday, including the one pass that absolutely convinced Kyle Shanahan in that game that this guy is for real. And we can be okay with him. Who knows how okay? But I'm not petrified of the future because we have to play Brock Purdy. But it's just, he hasn't done enough yet to deserve we don't want to shake his confidence.
Well, and I don't know whether it's that as much as we don't want to send mixed messages. We already have a complicated quarterback situation as it is with Garoppolo and Trey Lance. Regardless, I think they knew they weren't going to get him. And that made them decide, why even bother? There's no point in this. We're not going to get him, because I think the Rams did a good job of putting the word out. And it helped the Rams to scare everybody else off, because you get a guy who's more humble if he comes in with one waiver claim. Nobody else wanted you, Baker. Let's go do this. You're with us. We're the only ones who wanted you. Let's go make something good happen. And they did. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.